One of the gifts that I received when I was consecrated a bishop was a plaque framed. It's actually hanging in the sacristy here at the diocesan office. It is a quote from the Latin American bishop Dom Held Camara, who said, "Do not be scandalized by the people with whom I associate. If I'm going to be a bishop, I must be a bishop to everyone." It seems to me that's what I think about when I think about the Peter reading. That in essence, what it means to be, it seems to me, someone who has dedicated herself as a priest in the Church of God, or a deacon for that matter, is to be someone who is a priest for anyone, regardless of who they are. It's the nature of God's mercy that it be such. And in fact, it seems to me when I think about what is God asking of Christian leaders in this day as an expression of the gospel of Jesus in our tribalism, our polarization, our need to be politically precise, otherwise, oh, you're one of them, aren't you, because you don't agree with me. And the kind of rampant divisions that are pouring through our culture, the witness of those who are willing to be Christian leaders for anyone, I think is critically important as an expression of the mercy of God. There was a typo in the Litany for Ordinations. Sometimes typos can be prophetic. And that's what I picked up on. At top of page 5, for all members of your holy church that in your church, in their vocation and ministry, they may serve you in a true and godly life, we pray to you, O Lord. What it should say is, Lord, hear our prayer. What it did say was, have mercy on us. That's right. That is theologically precise. Because it seems to me that for us to truly serve in our vocations, it is both an act of mercy toward us that we've been called and invited into that position, but it is an expression of God's mercy that we serve. And both, in fact, are co-equally true. Because just like Isaiah, we certainly don't qualify in sort of the most exact sense at all. And the only way that even God, through his own angels, bridges the gap is through what feels to me, I just wince every time I read it, about a hot coal touching your lips. If you've been burned in any way, shape, or form, that's a second-degree burn. And yet, so it represents both purging and anointing by the fire of God. Both of those things. We are, if we say yes to these positions, both being purged and anointed. They are, in fact, two sides of the same coin. Because God hollows out that he might flow through. And that is, in fact, an expression of God's mercy. Even the Peter lesson. Peter could have easily begun that whole chapter by saying, well, as an apostle who was witness to the resurrection. But he doesn't use those terms. He comes to them, in fact, as a fellow elder. And speaks to them far more with the preposition with than he does with the preposition to or for. Again, that's the point, you see, because all of us are under the accountability of the chief shepherd, which in turn makes anyone in positions of leadership a fellow elder far more than he is or she over. There is an over aspect to it, of course, but the emphasis here is on the with and being under the chief shepherd of Jesus. And why is that so? Because he's actually talking to a church of people that are suffering, they're being persecuted, they are grieving, And you know as well as I do, when you're talking to someone in a place of grief and loss, the last thing that they need is, well, you know what you're supposed to do. Instead, what they need is, let's go do this together. It's with, you see. I think about all of that for Cynthia, because in some ways, a celebration such as this can either be, in essence, an exposition of the priesthood of Jesus, or, because you can't do both, or it can be an expression of how God is asking for his priesthood to be expressed through you. And I'm obviously leaning on the latter. That the way the eternal, forgiving, all-powerful priesthood of Jesus, who stands as an intercessor, bearing within his own body the marks that bring our forgiveness and our victory over death, the way that gets expressed through his priests in this generation, in my opinion, must be through expressions of mercy. When I think of the congregation where you're going, what would I see them welcoming? They'll have to say whether this is actually true or not. Is in fact a priest who will love them, be merciful in the midst of difficulty, walk through them in the very tough responsibility of reforming and rebuilding. Not an easy work, but she didn't sign up for easy. So the thing that I would say, both to you, Cynthia, but also to the rest of us, is that as I think about what is in front of us, what is around us, and perhaps even what is in us, what we both need to lean into individually, but express even more deeply than perhaps we have, is the mercy of God. The fact that we are not qualified, but he is purifying us and making us qualified by what he has done through his Son. And that the word that he continues to express through us are words of peace and forgiveness. A bruised reed he will not break. So while there may be plenty and are of people who in some ways embody a certain aspect of the priesthood of Jesus for their congregations, Cynthia, I would charge you that to be, as a priest, to know that to which you have been called is to be someone who lives and breathes and imparts primarily the mercy and the forgiveness of God. It's the only stand we have. Amen.
Amen.